In this lesson, we're gonna look through some of the fun books that I have collected or borrowed from the library. We're gonna look into the visual treatments, the techniques that other illustrators use. Hopefully that can give you inspiration and help you grow as well. So I want to share these illustrated books with you because each one teaches us something different about how other artists solve visual problems. Let's start with Owen Davey's Animal series. He's this British illustrator who's really figured out something interesting about vector drawing. See how clean these lines are? There is this thoughtful symmetry happening. But what I find fascinating is how disciplined he is with his layouts. Every grid, every angle feels very intentional. He's also very clever with using textures in his illustrations. He's working with these super crisp, clean vector shapes, right? But somehow he has made them feel alive. Look at these bug wings. These little tiny legs and their grainy shading, even the dirt in this background. It's like he's asking himself, how do I add life without losing clarity? And I think he does a really good job. Having beautiful texture that works with the visual context is one of the many challenges with digital work, keeping things from feeling sterile. His solution seems to be really tiny and strategic texture choices. They're subtle, but they also completely change how you experience this page. The symmetry thing he's doing, it could feel rigid if not done right, but notice how he breaks it just enough. I keep coming back to it because look at this soil texture. All these different browns working together. I'm guessing he used probably sponges with different colors, but the result is this beautiful sense of kind of fluffiness of the dirt. Like you can almost feel it. Here's another spread I really enjoy. It's such a smart solution to a common problem. How do you give the eye a place to rest without making things feel empty? He's essentially creating this natural frame with leaves around it by using the same color palette. So it's not super out of place, but it also gives people visual rest as they read through this book. You know what also strikes me? His color choices. They are limited, almost looks like screen printing, but that's exactly why they work. By constraining himself, he has unified everything while capturing all that natural beauty. The next book comes from Oliver Jeffers. He was from Ireland and now lives in the US, and he is able to paint realistically. Seriously, if you look at his gallery work, it's amazing. But for children's books, he does something really special. He is able to loosen up. I think that flexibility is amazing to have. What I'm seeing here is someone who understands the traditional media deeply and then translates that knowledge digitally. Look at this letter F. You can practically feel the waxy texture of the crayon or pastel. All these little pencil marks, these wet media streaks, there's just something so tactile about it. I think that's his real strength. And this connects to something we will dive into in this course. And how do you capture that hand-drawn authenticity when you're working digitally? We want the convenience of digital tools, but we don't want to lose that human touch. His color palette is deceptively simple. Nothing crazy happening here, but somehow each animal has this distinct emotional presence. That's a skill. And this next book also comes from Oliver Jeffers. It's called The Fate of Fausto. I won't spoil the story. I will only call your attention to a couple pages. Here's Fausto, our main character. Look at that posture. Everything about how he's drawn tells you that he thinks he's a big deal. And here is one of my favorite spread of this book. It's essentially monochromatic, just brown, different shades of brown, but through paint density and value changes, you get this incredible sense of dimension. And that is mastery right here. Later in the story, when this man is in a more humbling circumstances, you can tell the scale has changed. This vast portray of body of water, and he's almost just a tiny dot over there. And you can tell how the illustrator tells the same story together with the text, with the writer. And the next book is called Snowy Day, and this book comes from Ezra Jack Keats. And he really understood something that a lot of digital artists miss. He was an American illustrator, actually a pioneer in multicultural children's books. When you look at these backgrounds, instead of flat color fills, which is really, really tempting for digital artists, he's layering these pinkish, bluish tones, and probably with gel plate, and it just see this beautiful, irregular texture as the snowy background. When you look what's happening here, I can almost feel the joy of playing with textures, working with real art supplies on the table, making a mess. That's part of the beautiful process. He also used different techniques as well. In here for the tree, he used the collage, but inside the tree you can tell it's mixed media as well to communicate the contour of the tree bark. And here's another page, and you can see the subtle marbling effect happening with the blue hues and the green hues. It just adds depth without competing with the main elements. And for the snowy texture, there's a lot of play on this page. He's probably using cotton on the scanner, if I have to guess, or maybe a picture of it. And it's a perfect choice. The medium matches the subject matter. You can almost feel the fluffiness of the new snow. And on this page, when the night falls, instead of using a heavy black or a super dark color, which can be a little scary, he's using these tiny spray paint particles to communicate the time change, which is much more effective. The next illustrator is Christian Robinson. In this book, he tells a really fun story between two families of dogs. Without spoiling the story, I just want to show you a few pages that I really love. It's really tempting as illustrators to work in layers. It's very easy to manage, so each layer can function independently. But on this book, I think it adds a lot of character by putting everything actually on the same layer. I want to focus on the brush strokes around the dogs. You can almost tell where the strokes have been and leave the blank space as a silhouette for the dogs. Almost like he added an invisible frame that calls attention to the main character without actually pointing to it. It just used the brush strokes to gently guide your eye to the main characters. And also he did a really good job building textures. At the bottom, almost seems like he has used some kind of stamps as a tool to mimic the texture of bricks. And now let's take another close look at his brushwork. And here's another page with two families of dogs playing in this park. And I really love this shade of green. It's just really beautiful. You can see the traces of brush strokes intentionally framing each dog's character. And especially for the main character, you almost feel like there is emphasis to these two dogs right here, but without yelling, "Hey, I am the main character." So I think that's really cool. The next illustrator I want to introduce is Benji Davies. He's a British illustrator, and he had to solve an interesting problem. How do you use and show emotion when your character's face isn't very expressive naturally? And his answer is really interesting. These two books comes from a greater series that talks about friendship between a bear and a duck. So the bear figure is super introverted, and the duck neighbor is just the opposite. For the duck character, his face is super tiny and his whole figure is super tiny, but he has a very big personality. How do you communicate that? I think Benji Davies did a really good job using duck's wings as another secondary device, almost the primary device to communicate duck's emotion. He basically turned his wings into his hands. They communicate everything from determination to excitement. Benji Davies also does a really good job communicating with very simple lines. I want to call your attention to this fabric detail. Just with a few intentional strokes on this dotted pattern, you can immediately understand there is tension when he's drying off. You can tell like his paws or his hands are pulling this fabric just by looking at the creases of the fabric. And on this page, when he needs to transition from bright day to night, he adds these darker, scratchy textures over bright green. This technique creates natural layers without jarring transitions. So you can still tell it's brighter green, but it's not super contrasty. And on this page, when Bear's camping goes wrong, even the line quality tells the story. See how scratchy and uncertain this fishing line is? It really reflects the character's emotional state. So at this point, everything he thought about camping has gone out of the window. So nothing really worked, and he started missing his friend whom he ran away from. And the next book is called Off to the Nursery by Alice Orur. She is an award-winning Australian artist with this vibrant style. Look at this first page. It's essentially monochromatic. That means that she just used this one color. But through the transparency variations, density change, stroke quality, she's able to create all these different natural themes. Look at this cute little frog. It reads clearly despite the limited color palette. Even his back pattern, his expression, everything is there. So far, I have been really analytical about things, but sometimes you look at something and analysis just goes out of the window. Look at this tomato. This just makes me happy. I can't tell you why. I just look at the colors and the texture. It just makes me happy. Technically, it's kind of messy, but that's exactly its charm. And it's same with this marmalade jar. I just love the bright contrast, the use of color and the texture, the simple grid to communicate the textured paper. It just feels handmade. The next book we're gonna look at is called I Don't Wanna Hibernate. It's a cute little story about sleeping, illustrated by Rahhat. She's British, known for the soft, earthy colors. What interests me here is her underpainting technique. This tree trunk isn't just beige. There are these blue streaks, orange streaks flowing through, and it suggests light bouncing off of surfaces. It just makes everything feels more alive. And the layering of color is really sophisticated. Within each color block, you don't see just one flat, simple color. She takes her time to layer multiple hues to build things up, and that's how you get texture and spatial depth. Look at this cloud here. It's just so gracefully done. The last book we're going to talk about is called Hike It. It's by Martin Stanev. He's a Bulgarian illustrator. There are many things I really appreciate. Let's take a look. On this page, I really love how he uses framing as a tool. When you limit what you have to draw, it really removes the pressure to fill the entire page. I think that's a really smart answer to a problem. This entire book is about human and nature interaction. So he's balancing these harsh angular shapes with organic elements. He softens the hard rock contours with flowing plants, birds, and creates this nice tension. Earlier in this course, we talked about how to build different recipes for your mixed media work. Think of the texture exercise as a reference library. When you're planning a piece, what texture story do you want to tell? You can look through things that you have accumulated as a catalog or library or a shopping list, and then you can translate that onto a piece of work or a project. On this page, his color palette is super limited, but just because the color palette is limited, it doesn't mean that his result or his work is limited. Just using different blue hues, he's communicating all these mountain contours and these halftone patterns for shadows. They suggest material quality without being very heavy-handed. And I also love how organic his work is able to be. On this page, it talks about this beautiful aurora in the sky at night. Can you feel the softness and the flowiness of the light? And he did a good job using some kind of a powdery media and together with some ink splashes. And it's the same thing on this page with the pouring rain. You can tell the pouring from a body of water from a distance. It's very subtle. It doesn't really overwhelm the page, but it's nicely done. Throughout this book, he has this good thing going with the halftone texture. It's just brilliant, especially on this page. You can tell the tent almost reads like a mosquito netting, which is very similar to the actual netting. So using halftone is just the best choice over here. The same technique makes the Ziploc bags feels transparent.